Jadasloff swallowed the last of his meal, forcing the last bite down. What kind of people would serve a whole week's worth of protein and carbohydrates in a single serving? As he slid off the tall stool, he spun his shoulders. He knew the answer, of course. The kind of friendly, aggressively friendly, people who had taken one brief look at his ship after he had lifo-braked, and told him that, yes, it could be fixed, and who had then phonily suggested that Jadasloff rent a room in the establishment across the road for a couple of days. Hefting his bag, Jadasloff counted out enough credits to pay for room and board. Glancing over at the very large female who was busying herself in the kitchen, Jadasloff counted out a few credits extra and placed a stack on the counter. He was vaguely aware that there was some connection between the proprietor of the boarding house and the owner of the workshop where his ship was, hopefully being repaired, and until he was safely away from this backwater planetoid, he ought to stay on good terms with people scraping a living here. As Jadasloff hurried out in the bright, too bright sunlight, he once again read the sign over the gate across the road. Josh's Interstellar Vessel Restoration and Rehabilitation Establishment, it proudly proclaimed in badly lettered interlingua. The smaller sign underneath had given him some concerns, once he had worked out what was meant by ecologically sustainable post-industrial reclamation and mechanical disassembly facility. But what choice did he have? There was just one settlement on this rock, and the Josh had been the only mechanic who was willing to even give him a quote. A very reasonable quote too, Jadasloff had thought at the time. He quickly crossed the road and slipped inside. There it was, his ship. Looking much worse for wear, but Jadasloff was pleased to see that the gashes in the hull were patched. Then Josh came striding over, fangs showing. "Just in time," the bulky biped said, before Jadasloff could ask about the light red colour of the patches. "I just finished refueling her." Jadasloff looked around in confusion. "Her? Your ship?" "Oh, her, friend Josh?" "Her. Anyways, let me show you what I've done." A little later, Jadasloff and the Josh was crammed into the small cockpit. Jadasloff looked around, a sinking feeling in his overly full belly. "My cockpit certainly looks different. I had to use what parts I had, and I made it more intuitive." "Intuitive for your species, perhaps?" Jadasloff pointed out. "Why are there 3 small levers in front of my seat?" "The right pedal makes you go faster, the middle pedal makes you go slower, and the left pedal is the clutch." Jadasloff considered his next utterance carefully, pretending to stare at the pedals. The Josh was clearly crazy by the standards of most species. "I see. What is a clutch?" The Josh looked down at Jadasloff. "It's a clutch, device that momentarily disconnects the engine from the drivetrain. It allows the output shaft to be unclutched from the still rotating input shaft. Surely you know what a clutch is." "I see. Perhaps a better question would be why my ship suddenly needs a clutch." "Because I managed to fit your ship with an almost brand new, virtually undamaged 4-speed manual gearbox." "And for my education, friend Josh, what is a manual gearbox?" The Josh showed its fangs again, casually pointing to a lever sticking out at an odd angle from the floor. For some reason Jadasloff could not fathom, it was topped by a black sphere, with an infinity symbol inlaid on the top. "That is the gear stick," Josh explained, without explaining anything. "The actual gearbox is in line with the drivetrain." Sensing the incomprehension on Jadasloff's face, the hulking biped continued. "It is a mechanical device that lets you change the ratio of rotational speed between an input and an output shaft. Since this is a 4-speed gearbox, you have 4 ratios to choose from. Oh, plus the reverse, of course." "Of course. And you managed to interface this gearbox with the ship's drive?" "Worked on it all night. Burst of inspiration while I was busy patching your bodywork with Bondo. Those fumes really gets my imagination firing. I even took her on a short exo-atmospheric test drive where you had your breakfast this morning." "I am left speechless, friend Josh." "Don't mention it. This was a fun and tricky job. I learned a lot." Jadasloff looked around the cockpit, taking in the new pedals, the ball-topped lever sticking up from the floor at an odd angle, and he had to look twice, the pair of fuzzy hexahedrons hanging above the instrument panel. No, I quite literally don't know what to say. Part of me wonders how you came up with the idea. Part of me wants to know how it interfaces with a solid-state reactionless drive, with no rotary input or output.